right, and it's 7:15. Denmark is introducing a world-first emissions tax. Sound familiar? Targeting gassy cows, sheep and pigs. The livestock tax will be implemented in 2030 in an effort to reduce Danish greenhouse gas emissions by 70%. New Zealand scrapped plans for a similar scheme due to take effect next year, gifting the Danes the world first tag. I'm joined now by Senior Policy Advisor at Carbon Future, Sebastian Manhart. Morena, Sebastian, thank you for being with us this morning. 5 months of negotiation with farming and conservation groups. What are your thoughts on this tax plan?
Well, it's really quite an incredible achievement. As you might know, here in Europe, we've got farmers on the streets demonstrating with their tractors all over Europe. And in that environment, Denmark managed to pull off, as you said, a first of its kind law that is going to provide a vision for farmers for the future and turn them from potentially a blocker to climate change into an enabler of helping us fight climate change. And so this is something quite extraordinary.
Yeah, but the question is, will it stick? And I say that because of what has happened here in New Zealand, right? The current New Zealand government scrapped plans to tax our agriculture emissions from 2025. Denmark's tax scheme is to be implemented in 2030. So will it stay, do you think?
I think so. I think what Denmark did very differently to New Zealand is they recognized that you can't just come with a stick. You have to also come with a carrot. So they are providing significant subsidies, significant benefits to farmers who are willing to opt into this program and be part of the change, while penalizing those who do not. And those benefits, by the way, they start ramping up in 2027, 28. So I think this is a very different approach that's trying to provide farmers with essentially getting paid by being part of the solution.
Yeah, I note that the government is to provide 9.3 billion, this is in New Zealand dollars, to reforest 250,000 hectares of agricultural land by 2045 and set aside 140,000 hectares of land by 2030. So the target is cutting 70% of its total emissions by 2030. Do you think that what's being put in place will allow that to happen?
Well, I don't think it's a silver bullet. I think Denmark is quite humble in how it is looking at this and knows that this is the first of its kind, and they will have to revisit it and see if they need to double down on it or if they need to make changes to it. And by the way, one thing that I should also mention, because you mentioned the changes in soils and in forestry, but also what's really smart about this, they're coming at this from two levels, from the emission reductions, and at the same time, they're also planning to do what's called carbon dioxide removal, which is sucking CO2 directly out of the atmosphere through something called biochar carbon removal. And let me quickly explain it, because this is a beautiful circular story, where essentially you take biomass from the soils, from the leftover fields of the farmers, and you convert it into valuable products while locking away CO2 for thousands of years. So this is another example where they're taking this from a two-pronged approach while providing farmers with a revenue stream.
So we know that this is a world first. Given everything that you have just said, given what the government is implementing, do you think that this is a model that could be used around the world?
Yeah, I mean, let's face it, a third of the global emissions are coming from agriculture. I know that in New Zealand, it's 50%, in Denmark, it's 30%. And there's actually a lot of parallels between Denmark and New Zealand when you think about, population, the role of agriculture. And we need to find a new role for farmers, because farmers won't be able to do exactly what they've been doing for hundreds of thousands of years. And so what Denmark is suggesting here is to turn farmers from the producers of food into the stewards of land. And this is, I think, a really beautiful vision of essentially expanding their skill sets, expanding their role and their responsibility in a way that goes hand in hand with a future where we have to produce food while reducing and removing emissions.
So given all of that, just to finish things off, we know, as you said at the beginning of this, there were huge protests across Europe, right? So do you expect there to be scenes like that when this is eventually put into place?
Well, I think there's two things to say there. First, while farmers groups are split in Denmark, there has been much more buy-in and engagement throughout the process than from what I understand happened in New Zealand. But then second, again, I can't stress enough, there is money on the table. You mentioned it. It's almost 10 billion New Zealand dollars, right? And that is what was missing in New Zealand. And my fear is that trust has been lost potentially in the government of New Zealand to do this. So no politician will be willing to touch this anytime soon. And that's a shame, because this is really an opportunity to lead by example and turn the whole agricultural sector of New Zealand into, a future solution of climate change and exports.
You make some brilliant points. Thank you so much for being with us this morning, Sebastian. Sebastian Manhart, a climate policy advisor, joining us this morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much.